Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to the Sheena Metal Experience with your host, Sheena Metal, right here on LA Talk Radio.
That's right. It's the Sheena Metal Experience right here on LA Talk Radio. For more info on the show, latalkradio.com, SheenaMetalExperience.com. Don't forget to email me and let me know what you think of the show. If you're looking for me on social media, it couldn't be easier because I'm just at Sheena Metal everywhere. I'm also the founder of a movement of peace, love, kindness, and unity. We're at IamRaisingTheVibration.com, and our nonprofit hub is RaisingTheVibration.org. My spiritual practice is at IamRaisingYourVibration.com and at SheenaMetalSpiritual.com. And I'm always honored to announce that I'm a staff pastor at the Founders MCC Church in Hollywood. I'm kind of the new age girl there. And my monthly interfaith service is called Saturday Night Spiritual at SaturdayNightSpiritual.com. Please come and see us on October 12th when my special guest will be my dear friend Carolyn Hennessy from General Hospital and True Blood. And we'll be having a wonderful opening prayer from my dear friend Angelica Perman, who's one of my WeLightWorkersUnite.com light workers. And also my wonderful guest, who's I'm going to announce in 1 second, will be there. My musical director, Orlando De La Paz, will be there. Perhaps with a mini choir is the threat. And of course, always the head pastor at Founders, my good friend Keith Mazingo, joins me today.
Hey,
how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
And our Spanish ministries, Alexandra Escoto, will be there too. I'm
Yeah.
just announcing everyone who'll be there.
Yes, all sorts of things.
All different people doing exciting things. Carolyn's going to talk about hoodoo. How about that for your Southern roots, Keith?
I like it.
Right?
I really like it.
In studying hoodoo, she found out that in the South, a lot of people would go to the church and then after church service find out where the hoodoo lady was and then go do their hoodoo.
Okay.
See, we alternate spirituality people have always been around. We just hid in the shadows.
Just hid. Yes, I never knew about those.
Do you find my spirituality to be that alternative? I mean, from what you grew up with, but from the progressive Christianity of Founders, do you find me to be way off the beaten path?
No. Some of the language is different.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you're sort of the virgin among us.
Mm.
You know, some of us grew up with church language and Christian church language and conservative church Christian language. And that it's so refreshing to have someone who speaks a different language, and yet we recognize that it's the same spirit. It's the same spirit within all of us that's driving all of us. And you teach me language, and the guest you have, I'm still feasting from the last one we had, because what
Radon, the wonderful Radon Chong. She was here with me that next Monday. We did 2 hours here on the air and just broke down the whole world. Isn't she a dear friend? I love her.
She is amazing, and I'm amazed at what I call spirit, Holy Spirit, showing people and all walks of life. And you happen to be bringing in other famous people like yourself, and people that we see on TV or hear on the radio or see in the movies, and we're like, is that so-and-so? Is that really so-and-so?
Isn't that fun?
Yes, it is. But then it's not, you have to get over that immediate gaga over who that is. Because every person you have brought has been someone who was deeply spiritual and was willing to come out of the closet with that spirituality in your service. And that has touched me, I think, deeper than anything. I was just thinking, the first time you had Radon Chong on, it turned into a healing service.
Right, because Radon did one of my Raising the Vibration gatherings that I actually did at Founders before I was pastored there.
Yes, and she just felt something
She's
deep within
like
her.
that.
I have to lay hands on you. We have to touch you. Anybody else who's having a problem, just come. And it reminded me of growing up in the Pentecostal church where we had healing services. And we would go through healing lines, or we would all gather around and lay hands on each other. That's very biblical. But it's not about it being biblical. It's about what works. It's about us being in one mind and one accord, which is when the Spirit really moves.
Well, and I try to cater my language to all faiths. So you'll notice during the sermon, I'll change God, spirit, source, universe, goddess. I'll say different things.
Sure.
So no one feels alienated. And the first time that I went and became familiar with Founders, I went with Reverend Steve Peters, who's been a part of a lot of my ceremonies, and Keith and I met through him. And I did not know, it never occurred to me that a church that was founded by folks in the LGBTQI plus community would have communion, because I thought of communion as, Catholicism, Pentecostal, strict Episcopalian, even Presbyterian. We didn't have that. So when I created Saturday Night Spiritual, I basically had Keith and Alejandro sent me what their services were like, because Keith does the 9 and the 11, and then Alex does the 1 in Spanish. And I just took the format and I changed it and just put in some stuff, but it's basically the same format with everything in the same order, except whereas in the sermons with Keith and Alejandro, it's mostly them throughout everything. With me, I plug the guests in there in places where you would go. Right. And some of it's me and some of it's them. But I didn't want to do communion because I knew that it would scare a lot of folks off. Absolutely. It would be too churchy. And when Keith and I first had lunch and came up with this crazy idea that I was going to do this and they were going to take me on, one thing we said was that our goal was to use interfaith as a way to bring in folks to the church that would never have come before because it was too churchy. Right. Because I think it not only has MCC traditionally been a refuge for folks who grew up like you do in the church that then felt like they were ostracized for whatever reason, not churchy enough, primarily gay, but then other foundlings as well. I think that there's a bigger message even behind MCC, which is one of community and inclusivity and warmth and outreach and being an important part of Los Angeles area, bringing in people who have a need or a hole in them that needs to be healed, irregardless of how they grew up or what their faith was. And so I wanted to make sure that we cared. So I decided instead of doing communion that I would do a blessing where I would let people come up and basically I would bless whatever they wanted. And I've blessed children and animals, and mostly people come up and whisper into my ear their deep-seated fears and worries, and I tell them it's going to be okay, and I hug them. It's a lot of hugging.
Yes, and we do a lot of that in our Sunday service.
Yeah, and you do that with communion, which I'd never seen before. Yes. I'd never seen all the hugging. I'd seen in Catholic services and Episcopal services, here you go, here's your wafer, here's your wine, and hit the road. I had never seen all the hugging, which is what inspired me to take communion for the first time from Keith.
So what happens and just to give you a little history, in Metropolitan Community Church and MCCs here and around the world, it used to be in our bylaws that you had to offer communion in one service on Sunday. Okay. So if you had multiple services, you had to have at least one service where it had communion, because we had so many people that were fleeing from churches that had communion every Sunday. I mean, it's the difference between high church and low church. And high church, like you have had a little bit of experience with, has communion every Sunday. And the main focus is about getting to the table. You got to get to the table. Right. The message is not as important. It's fine. It's just not as important. The music is fine, but it's not as important. It's about getting to the table and getting that moment of being present with God in material form and taking in that morsel of God to represent God in you. And so
everything else is dressing around the communion.
Is around the communion. So because we have so many people that came from that background, when Reverend Troy Perry started his services, he decided that he would have communion. And also because in those high churches, and I'm sure there are exceptions to the rule, so please don't, shoot the messenger. I haven't been to all those churches, but generally speaking, in high churches, they will qualify who can come to the table. So if you're not a member of that church or that denomination, you can't come for communion. It's not an open table.
No, and then you're exactly right. That's why I've never taken communion before, because I've only seen it at Episcopal and Catholic churches, neither of which I was a part of. Right. And people were, especially at the Episcopal churches, they were like, you can come up and do it. We don't care. But I always felt from growing up an Irish Protestant with a lapsed Irish Catholic father and an Irish Protestant mother, I have to tell you, I felt like there was betrayal in getting up and pretending you were Catholic if you weren't. Because, I grew up in a time when still the line between Catholic and Protestant was so severe. It's much more blurred now. But it used to be really crazy to the point where my father's relatives wouldn't come to the wedding because it was in a Presbyterian church. So the thought of me going up there and being like, "Hi, can I have a free wafer and some wine?" It just seems so not right.
Right.
Like a sacrilege to them.
Right.
Like it just to be, you wouldn't go to somebody's house and use their private bathroom if they instead of the guest bathroom. You wouldn't go and sleep in their bed.
Right.
It just didn't seem right to me. And people thought it was so strange, but it's a disrespectful. I even felt weird when I went to St. Pat's in Manhattan about throwing $20 in the collection plate because I thought, oh my God, if they knew it came from an Irish Protestant, they'd probably set it on fire. And then I went to their gift shop and bought a rosary, people. That's how, and I love that rosary. But, not everybody enjoys the whole, hey, let's all be interfaith. Not everybody's into that.
Right. And going back to the communion, something that makes MCC communion different than any other communion that you may have ever experienced or seen is that not only do we offer an open communion, which means anybody, literally we believe that is God's table and God's, while it's God's people setting the table, that it is about people communing with God and having that moment alone with God and a moment of prayer. And at MCC, so you don't have to be a member of our church to come. You don't have to be a member of MCC. You don't have to be a member of the Christian faith. You don't have to be a member of any church or any faith. You may be an agnostic or an atheist and still come to the table because communion is the same root word as community.
Right.
And it's about us coming together and sharing that spiritual meal together. And what happens different on Sundays at our church than you'll get at any of the other churches is that you were talking about the hugging and all of that going on at
It's
communion.
beautiful.
We pray a blessing over anyone who wants a blessing. Whether they actually take the elements or not makes no difference. If they come up, they want a blessing, we pray over everyone who wants
That's my goal, that someday I'll get to go upstairs to the big church and become a hugger.
Oh my goodness.
I just want to become...
You can start this Sunday. You don't have to wait.
I want to, because I just thought that was, and it was funny because when I went with Steve and he was sitting next to me and he said, "Are you going to go up and get communion?" Because he did, and I said, "No, I don't belong to the church, and I shouldn't." This was before I belonged to the church. I said, "No, I don't, and I shouldn't." And he said, "Okay." And then I was sitting there and I was watching it and I was thinking, but this is so beautiful and inclusive. And this is for everybody. So I ran my little butt up there and made sure I got in Keith's line because I wanted to feel safe. Because it's scary when you've never done that stuff before. Right. I mean, it's I did not grow up in that world where, I wasn't baptized. I've never taken a communion. I went to Sunday school for a brief period of time because my mom taught Sunday school. But then, of course, the famous story of how she got fired for making a lifesaver roll, yarn Jesus, and a creche made out of riddle sticks. And that didn't go over very well, and they got rid of her. And they were such good art projects.
They were. I think that would have gone over really well in my Sunday school growing up.
And I talked about this during one of my sermons at Saturday Night Spiritual, that the idea that little kids could have a little Jesus that they could carry around with them, and that they would associate him with yummy treats and deliciousness. And I mean, like I said, he was the total Godspell Jesus too, total rainbow yarn Jesus. And Mom adopted the rainbow before the gays. Like, she was all about the rainbow from the beginning. So I just think that, that they're, the kind of communion that you do is something that she would have loved.
Yeah.
Not scary.
Most people, I think, do appreciate it, even if they're not used to it. And see, oh, this is different, and this means I am included. And here's the other piece of it: why we do offer it at all three of the services on Sunday, and not just one of the services. We still have such a diverse group of people that come into our doors, and those people that have come from that background that want that communion, then it's really important for us to at least offer it. That doesn't mean everybody has to come, and it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you if you don't come.
Right.
It just means it's here if you want it.
Right.
And so that's why we offer it at all of the different services.
I think it's wonderful. And I wanted to do something that was like that to honor you, but wasn't going to freak out people who heard the word communion and ran for the hills.
And for me, it's, I told you I grew up in the Pentecostal church. Low church, communion is not as important. It's not about getting to the table. We hardly ever had communion. We may have had it once every year or two.
Yeah.
We didn't have it every Sunday. I know all the high church folks are going, but that's Pentecostals. We just didn't.
Well, and Presbyterians didn't either, because that would have taken precious time away from the coffee cake and from judging everyone's outfits and trying to figure out how much everyone made. I mean, so that, because Presbyterianism, First Presbyterian Church, we were First Presbyterian churches. The Presbyterian Church can be different depending on, it's very much a social church.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I remember the sort of the sociability of it, I want to say snobbery, but snobbery of it more than I remember, it being very churchy. I just remember everybody just running like they hadn't eaten in a year to those coffee cakes. And I was a fat child first in line, but thinking, well, I didn't really get anything spiritually from that. But, man, double stuffed Oreos are amazing. So I just think it wasn't, I never went to a church that really grabbed me, where I really felt, and like we talk about, like I talk to you about all the time, my mom always said, someday you'll find the place where you feel like you're home, and you'll know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought that would never happen. I thought, well, isn't that a lovely thought? But I'm just going to be one of those people who's never going to find that. And then lo and behold, there you were.
You found it.
How about there? And then I found
Ain't
it.
that something?
And then I found it. And when people start, because some of my friends start to get a little like, to church, one of my best friends who's going to come on November 9th, which is the next service is October 12th. That's the one Carolyn's at. November 9th is the next one, and that's my mother's birthday and the anniversary of the movement. So I had talked to Keith previously about wanting to get baptized by him at MCC, because I never have been. I thought, well, what a good night to do it on Mama's birthday.
Yeah.
What a good way to honor her and to honor the movement that I started for her on her birthday. And I called one of my best friends, because my idea was I wanted all of my best friends to talk a little bit. So my sister LA is going to get up and talk, and my friend Kelly, who I didn't think I'd ever get up in front of people, is going to read an Irish prayer, my Irish friend Kelly. And I wanted my my friend Suzanne to sing. And, previously we had talked, and she was like, well, my husband and I, we don't, I don't know that we're really into church. And, but when I sat down and I explained to her exactly what it was, and she was like, oh, yeah, I think we could come and do that. So I'm hoping she's going to come and sing with Orlando on that night, sing a number with him.
Good.
And what a godsend he was last time, right? He just went right from a special guest to musical director in one, and now he's all planning all these things, and he's all excited, and I'm just like, run with it. Whatever, the more the merrier. Just his piano playing during the blessing and the giving and the peace, love, kindness, and unity exchange, which you call passing of the peace, right?
Yes.
So just that, just all of that. Just the music underscoring all of that was so beautiful and so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And the more music, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, music strategically placed in any any kind of gathering, whether it's religious or not, is of utmost importance.
Absolutely.
And you need somebody kind of tuned into not only the leadership but the audience to know what's needed. When you need something upbeat, when you need something slowed down, when you need something to all agree with. And especially if he knows where you're going with the message. I work with music folks all the time,
and your 11 o'clock lady, she's unbelievable.
Yes,
she is just she's a hot number. She is fantastic. She's a beautiful pianist. You've got a wonderful band and a wonderful choir, and she's got a beautiful voice, and she really grounds that stuff, and she has a real presence. Because I think a good, and Orlando is also a minister. I think a good music minister has to really be a good minister.
Yes.
Because you're doing the same kind of thing. You're doing ministry. And everybody that I've had as special guests, Johnny Whitaker, then Darby Hinton, then Radon Chong, next month Carolyn Hennessy, they all have that kind of ministerial energy to them when they speak.
Yes.
And I think it's important because it's different than speaking at, a Toastmasters or, at somebody's memorial service. I mean, there's something about people go there to get inspired and they want inspirational, motivational speaking. And interestingly, this from being in the entertainment business before I knew my life was going to take this turn and getting to know these folks for their creative projects and discovering in getting to know Johnny, how in tune he was with his Mormon upbringing, getting to know Darby and finding out that he had been a motivational speaker for Tony Robbins, getting to know Radon and finding out her spirituality, getting to know Carolyn and finding out she'd been practicing hoodoo. I mean, all of this stuff is amazing.
Well, and Bill last time.
And Bill Font, right? Talked about Judaism.
He was delightful.
Yeah. Well, I know how important it is to him. And like he said when he spoke, he was somebody who was very much a lapsed, sort of just a social Jew. And then he moved to the Wilshire district and started meeting folks that were Orthodox and going to Seders with them, and sort of has recaptured his Judaism in this really beautiful way, which I think is nice. I think that somewhere along the line, man has convinced people that religion is bad.
Right.
But it's not anything to do with God, and it's not to do with the history of your people. It just has to do with what some people have said. And some people say a lot of douchey things. We don't need to listen. So it's nice when people go back and recapture their faith. Like the way that Alejandro, when he's been here, has talked very openly about how there's, even though he doesn't consider he's not a priest, there are things in him from his Catholic upbringing that are very important to him. And I love that when you go to a service at Founders MCC, there's the giant oil painting of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Yes.
Because
from Mexico.
she's rocking that thing. And my friend Rebecca Haywood, who did the opening prayer, my shaman friend last time, she very much identifies, she calls her the mother, that Guadalupe is that's her thing. So, but, but that's also a part of our Los Angeles history, is that Mexican background. I just think that somewhere we've let all our history go. And I think that if you don't resonate with something that's going on in your faith, okay, then you don't have to. But at the same time, why not embrace the things that you do love? You don't have to throw everything out. There are things I love about Catholicism. I didn't grow up with it because by the time my parents got married, my father was very anti it. And I was never allowed to run off and become a Catholic with my very Catholic grandmother. And I don't think she wanted to take me because I was the weird Protestant child. But I'm fascinated by the mysticism and the saints and the incense. And
right.
I think that Catholicism can be very mystic. So I think we have to find ways to love what we love and still be who we are.
Right. And you always make this analogy. I think every time we've been together, you made the analogy about going to the salad bar.
Oh, yeah, the spiritual salad bar.
I just think that is so
right?
what we're about. It really is. You don't have to like everything on the salad bar, but that doesn't make the whole salad bar bad because there's something on it
you're not going to sit
and
and scream at the green peppers for an hour and go, are you going to take those? Those are wrong. How can you put those on your plate? But there are people like that. I've seen people at salad bars criticizing their friends for, oh my God, how can you take that? That's disgusting. But we've become that with spirituality. If it's not us, then it's wrong. And that dissidence, emotional dissidence over religion is a lot of where we have been culturalized into an us and them mentality, which then bleeds over into our sociology, into our politics, into our culture. We have become the society that if you're not just like me, there's something wrong with you.
Right.
And then that makes folks feel bad. Well, what if I'm gay and I know I don't belong in the Catholic Church, really? But what if I still, want to put St. Francis around? Or what if I collect holy cards? I collect holy cards, not even Catholic prayer cards. What if I go to the Catholic bookstore and get them? And some I've gotten at metaphysical bookstores too. I get them at the Crystal Shop and at the Catholic bookstore. And once I was asking a lot of questions in the Catholic bookstore. And I think the lovely guy that was working there had finally figured out I didn't know anything about Catholicism. And he finally said, are you sure you're in the right place? And I said, oh, you know what? My father was raised Catholic, but he didn't know much about it because he'd left the church, and I'm trying to find out what it was like. And then it was like 5 people were there to help me, like, oh, look. And they were all, look at this, and here's this, and look at this saint, and look at, because I spent about a year, the first year that I did the raisingthevibration.org movement, studying saints, because I felt like being a founder of a nonprofit, you're on that same sort of journey as a lot of those folks were on. Sure. The idea of saints being like actual living people who at one point in their life got the download from the universe and then said, oh, my life isn't going to be this anymore. Now my life's going to be this. And I felt like I was on that same journey, not to be canonized, but, that same journey of...
It's possible,
Is that St. Sheena? The same journey of God speaking to me, and suddenly my life was different. Yeah. And I was fascinated by all the different stories and fascinated by how many of them were psychics and mystics. How many of them were royalty who had renounced their positions to follow spirit and to really take that Christ path of I always think of Jesus. My mama used to always describe him this way too. She's like, oh, Jesus, he didn't want to be this and he wanted to be that. He just wanted to walk from town to town with his friends and heal people. And she made that sound like the best job in the world. You're just walking from town to town with your friends and healing people. And to turn your life in that direction, it can be a little daunting.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
you've been on that path your whole life, so you didn't have to make a sharp turn at 50.
Well, I did make a sharp turn though. At
Yeah.
one point, not a sharp turn. I made a turn at one point because for years I was a school teacher and a music director at
Okay.
the same time at the church. So, it's one thing to sit behind the piano at church. You don't have to get up in front of people. You don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
You just kind of do what the choir leader tells you to do, or
Yeah.
you kind of tinkle around and know when to come in and when not to come in, and to take your cues from whoever's up front. And then at one point, about 15 years ago, I get this email about a job opening here at the founding church, and I left teaching. I left my teaching career.
Wow.
And some of the teachers came to me and said, we understand what you're doing. We totally get what you're doing. And we admire you for what you're doing, but we're stuck where we are, and you are taking a risk by just leaving your whole career. You're even leaving the state, and you're making this amazing jump, a leap. It really was a leap of faith. And I said, well, here's the good part about it. I mean, I can always come back. It's not like if I jump off and it doesn't work, well, I'll just do something else, or I'll come back and do this. And I don't mind teaching school. I loved teaching school. The kids kept me a lot younger than I've
I
been
bet.
since then. You always knew the latest clothes, the latest fashions, the latest music, the latest who's in the news kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The kids kept me young. But I did make that leap, and so far it's been good for me, and I knew that it was the right path for me. So you will know the same thing.
Oh,
yes, it
I
meant
absolutely
leaving
know.
people behind. It meant leaving people that were very settled in what they were doing and their ministry, which didn't take them off somewhere else, but kept them right where they were. And so I think you'll find that too for you.
Yeah, I know I'm exactly where I belong. I think everybody in my life knows that I know I'm exactly where I belong. I think I'm exactly where I always belonged, but maybe I had to just become mature enough to realize it was where I always belonged.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever felt like I was home more than I do now. And with every step that I take on the spiritual journey, I feel more like I'm home, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and in such a beautiful way. And I had to, let go of some stuff that no longer served me. People, some career stuff that I'm so thankful that I had.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to let go of that sort of pounding my head against the wall and the why, and really embrace this. And I understand this is a journey that not everybody can take with me. And some people think I'm insane for even talking about it when I could be spending all this time talking about, about me and some play I'm doing and, being famous or whatever the story is. But the truth is my goal is, and it has always been since the day I founded the movement 3 years ago, has been to take all of these wonderful people that I've amassed and all of the wonderful things that I've done as an artist and combine them with my spirit work and my work for the world and make one big giant thing that is everything at once.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm working towards doing. And Keith and I are going to make some announcements in this year and next year hopefully about more things I'm doing at the church. And just really continuing to grow that idea that you can combine spirituality and the arts. You can combine spirituality and entertainment.
Of course.
Because all the people you've seen out so far at the show, super spiritual people.
Absolutely. And that it's, again, growing up in the South and hearing some backwards preachers call it Hellywood instead of Hollywood.
Oh, that's a
And-
new one.
and it's Hellywood.
Oh, that's
Did you not know? I
fantastic.
heard it on a newsreel
Oh,
the other day, and I was
that's
like just
fantastic.
shaking my head.
Hollywood.
And I'm like, and I have a Hellywood address now, so just
Oh, that's
in
wonderful.
case they're wondering.
Nice.
But I just keep thinking, sometimes I'll hear from people back home, some of my conservative friends back home, that will say, why do these stars get up at these award shows, at the Oscars, at the Emmys, and use their platform to call for this or call for that? How dare they have an opinion, and how dare they use it? And I'm like, okay, so you do understand that those people are really people, right? They're not just characters on a screen or in a show, or that they really are people. And so what I want to applaud you with so much is you're bringing those same people as people and letting them introduce their spiritual lives and let other people know that it's okay to have a spiritual life. The other piece of that is there are some people that will say, well, I don't want to go to church. I don't want to be around church. I don't want to be a churchy person.
Okay.
And yet, at the same time, some of those same people are crying out for a community.
Yes.
But not a fake community.
Mm-hmm.
They need to go to something where people are real, where people are saying things like, we're diverse here. You may not believe the way we believe. We're not going to shove our beliefs down your throat. We may share with you what we believe and what works for us. And when I say us, I mean generally me. Because when I share what I believe, the people in any given room may not believe exactly what I believe either. But the point is that you don't have to. The point is that we're in a group of people that says, I'm not going to judge you for what you believe. It's okay for you to believe whatever it is. We're just glad you're here. And we're glad that you're here to, I hope that we're all there. You call it raising the vibration. That to me says you're raising the spiritual part in all of us. In addition to that, we're called a community church, Metropolitan Community Church. We're there to build community and to provide community.
Right, which is so important, and so many people are lacking in that right now.
Yes, you have to have a safe place. Does that mean it's always perfect? No, but it's not always perfect in friendships. It's not always perfect in families. And Lord knows, even if I'm by myself, it's not always perfect between my right side brain and my left side brain.
God, no.
Occasionally, we have fights with each other inside of me.
Yes, and here too. Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I was so adamant about broadcasting the services, because I mean, you do anyhow with yours, which is wonderful. And again, I copied the model, so I just did what they did. But I really wanted to do it because I have, spiritual clients from all over the world from my practice, and so many times our sessions involve them explaining to me how they're lonely. And also sometimes this separation of, well, you're there and you live this LA life, and we're here and our lives are different. So I feel if they watch the service online, then they can meet my friends, because everybody who's involved in the service is somebody I love, and they can get a feeling for what my life is like and see that it's not really any different than theirs. It's just I do mine in front of a camera. That's the only difference. But it's the same thing. And then just to feel like you're a part of something. I've created sort of this, whenever I do a live broadcast like the one we're doing now, whether it's, and I talk about anything spiritual like we are today, or even I'm doing one of my videos from my bed, I always refer to it not as I'm doing a video for you, but please join in the healing circle. Because, and I always say, and you know this, make a friend.
Yes.
While you're in that chat room with however many different people, make a friend. So yesterday I was here on the air and I had a guest cancel. And I just decided, well, I'm going to do it by myself. And I did some psychic readings and some spiritual counseling, and I didn't have a guest and there was no celebrity here. And I just kept saying, join the healing circle. And I looked up during the live broadcast and there were 229 people in the chat. And we had like 4,500 views during that 2 hours, just from people joining the healing circle and telling their friends to join the healing circle. And that's the same kind of thing that we're building with Saturday Night Spiritual in such a beautiful way. I mean, I think every service we've done has at least had 1,000 views so far. So we're really building those up. And then my wonderful technical director, Ernie Cornish, who's with the church, He has now bought a camera that
Yes.
he can control from his phone, so he can zoom in, zoom out, move it around. So we're really upping the game. And Orlando's bringing in some people, and we're really kind of upping the game of what it's going to look like. We're going to have a technical rehearsal before the next one and get the lights just perfect, and it's going to become a fancy show now. And it's going to just grow and grow and grow. And I think it's so wonderful, because people need to see all spiritualities living together, because that's what the world is.
Yeah.
We're not telling you come do our thing and then these people are wrong. It's all about us. No, it's you can come and enjoy this, and you can get up and go to church the next day wherever you go.
Right.
So
Absolutely right.
that's, feel free and enjoy. It's hard if you're here and you've got synagogue or you've got a Seder Saturday. It's hard, but you certainly can. If you're somewhere else, you can watch this anytime you want. I do lose a lot of my Jewish friends when it's Saturday night. That's the only thing about Saturday, but you're always going to lose somebody. We had talked about Sunday night, but I figured for two reasons. First, I figured your folks would already be burnt out from coming to something at the church during the day. And then I also figured that most people are burnt out by Sunday night because they've gone somewhere else for church. With my improv shows are Sunday nights, and it's a great night, but coming to something like that is different than going back to another spiritual thing on Sunday.
Right. And if you're going to do it with regularity, the people are getting ready for work on Monday.
Yeah.
No matter what their faith or non-faith, they're getting ready for work on.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
Sunday night's not going to be as wide open. People are likely to stay out and enjoy Saturday night. Especially here in Los Angeles.
Yeah. And it's early enough, because you got to get up in the morning. So we make it early enough that that if somebody wants to, they can go out and party afterwards.
That's right.
Come
And
to
we
the
do.
service and
We
then
have
go do
people
something.
We
Yeah.
do. We have people that come and then go out and do karaoke at the bars and stuff. I'm like,
Why not?
wow.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go have fun.
Yes. Keith goes home and goes to bed.
Oh,
This
yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I have to get up and have a 9
I go
o'clock
to dinner
service.
with friends.
Yes.
The first time I went home and went to bed, but the first time, I think we were at the church later that night talking.
We were.
But the last two times we found a little groovy little spot in Los Feliz, and a bunch of us go and have dinner. And it's really
Yeah,
fun.
there's some great restaurants
Yeah.
right around the church.
Yeah.
Several places that are amazing.
Yeah. It's we found a little groovy place that we like to go, and it's fun. And it's just fun to just decompress. It reminds me of the old days when you'd go out after you did a play and you'd go somewhere afterwards, and that was fun. Did you do that? Did you ever act? Did you ever have a theater experience?
Yes.
Okay. Oh no, is it a secret?
No, I grew up in the tobacco barns of eastern North Carolina when I was a small child, and my mama would take, she bought a little black and white TV. I don't think we had color TV back in those days. Anyway, she bought a little black and white TV to take out to the tobacco barns, and I grew up with Andy Griffith, and I wanted to be Opie Taylor.
Really?
I really wanted, we're the same age, and I thought if he can do it, I can do it. And my mom was over all of the dramas at our church.
Okay.
And we had lots of dramas at our church. And mama, when we do the children's one, or if there was a child involved, I always had the main role. So I did grow up with that. And then as I was older, I did do some community theater.
So you know what that ensemble feeling of theater is.
Yes.
And to me, a theater is a church. That's why I want to bring theater to the church so badly. I just been driving poor Keith crazy about, I could do this theater thing. We could do this and we could do this. Because to me, theater and church are the same thing. And you
Sure,
have a
of
theater
course.
in your church. So to bring theater to a church, to me, is just like a no-brainer.
So you're
I
bringing
think
theater to a church that has a theater.
And the first time I ever did the vagina monologues was in a church. It was in a Unitarian church on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And it was fantastic. And it was packed. And the church was, and the pastor from the church introduced the night. And she was this amazing, like, African-American woman with like a bright white, tiny little afro that was so cool. And she was all in bright colors, and her robe was like rainbow. And I'm like, oh, this kind of church I can get into. This was in 2006. And I remember going home and telling my mom, like, have you tried the Unitarian church? Because my mom was forever looking for a church and not finding the right one for her. And I said, have you ever tried the Unitarian church? I think you might really resonate there.
I would love for you to do that, and I would love for it to get so big we have to take it to the sanctuary.
Let's do it.
Because even in the sanctuary, we have theater seating.
Well, it's probably so big we would have to take it to the sanctuary. We'd have to figure it out.
Well, we can seat 333 people up there, so let's do it.
My goal is for Saturday Night Spiritual to get so big we got to move it up there.
That would be fabulous.
I think big. Bigger than just going and being a hugger, although I do want to go upstairs and be a hugger.
Let's do it.
I think it would be wonderful if it got so big that we could take it upstairs. But I love the fact that it's growing in the intimacy it's growing in now. Because things take time, right?
They do. And you also have so many people that I'm finding more and more people are, especially in large cities like LA, with the traffic that we deal with, they're not always willing to come out, but they still want some of the experience. So we're having more and more people join us online. I mean, you were just talking about how many people are online. So more and more people are joining online, and even though you're not there physically, you still have a sense of community and being a part of something. So we're finding more and more of that as well. So of course, as a pastor, I'm looking at all of these things and trying to say, how do we make it as comfortable as we can for those people who are joining us online as well to get part of that experience when they can't or not, either they're not willing or they're not able to go out and fight traffic in places like Los Angeles.
Right. Or they just can't get there. Some people just can't leave their homes.
Right.
And I want to make sure they feel included too. And I have clients everywhere from, I have a client that's out like in the middle of the Indian Ocean. I have clients in Australia. I have clients in India, in Trinidad, all over Europe, Canada, of course, and all over the States. I mean, from little tiny places in Alaska to the middle of Manhattan. And I wanted everyone to feel included. And I love the way that thank you for introducing me to our beautiful technical director, Ernie Cornish, who thinks big, because the first 3 broadcasts, were like, oh, wait a minute, if we put the camera there, then people can't see the blessing. Oh, wait, if we put it there, they can't see the musical guest. And this time, for the opening prayer, Angelica Perman, who's here with me as part of my WeLightWorkersUnite.com group, she is not only doing an opening prayer, but she's doing a sound bath. So it's going to be, the sound healing. It's going to be amazing. So it's going to be like a vibration raising sound healing.
Love this.
Yeah, it's going to be so cool. She brings the bowls and does them.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, I want all kinds of stuff like that, but I want to be able to capture it. And we've been working so hard. And then last time, after the night after the show, Ernie sent me something and he said, I think I found a camera that we can use to capture everything. And he can literally sit in the back and just move because now that Orlando's more a part of it and there's going to be more music incorporated, I want to make sure people can see the blessing, because it's important for people to come up and see people get hugged and get helped.
Right.
I blessed a pregnant lady's belly. I mean, these are the most important things in my life. These are things that matter and that really mean something. And I really believe that this is a time in our country, in our world, yes, but especially in our country, where we need people to see more love and more kindness and more. That's why peace, love, kindness, and unity were the cornerstones words of this movement. More gentleness and people loving each other and hugging each other, because the internet, as beautiful as it is and with wonderful things it brings us, it has also brought a lot of nasty people who don't have the guts to be nasty to your face, going on and trolling the internet and just being nasty and saying hurtful things and smart alecky things and sarcastic things. And the problem is that human beings are very, very sponge-like creatures, and we suck up that negative energy. And for folks who don't have a really strong constitution, it makes them like that. And sarcasm has become the thing. And that's okay. It's fun to be sarcastic and have a funny sense of humor. And God knows I have a dark sense of humor. But it's also cannot take the place of the gentleness in your soul. And I think it's important that people, continue to see that. And to me, that's what all spirituality should be about. But it's not. And I'll tell you, there in some ways, and here go everybody turning off their radios. Sorry. There is a fundamentalist evangelical part of the New Age community that is every bit as nasty and every bit as restrictive as any Christian religion I've ever seen. Wow. It's just different people,
Right. Right.
It's, thou shalt always hug a crystal, which is great. But what if you don't want to? There are no rules. There are no rules for any of it. Because the truth is, we could all die, and while worms eat out our eyes, we could be like, oh man, we really missed the bet on that thing, life after death thing. We don't know. We believe, we have faith, but we don't know. So for somebody to criticize somebody else's spirituality, we don't know that they're not right and I'm wrong.
Right.
Who knows?
Yeah, and I have friends that are atheists.
Yeah,
imagine
I
that
do too.
growing up.
I have many.
But I have an acquaintance back in Baton Rouge that I respect a whole lot. There's one thing I don't like about him, and that, as he is an atheist, and it's not that he's an atheist, he judges everybody else and puts everybody else down if they're not also an atheist.
Sure.
He thinks
Yes.
everybody should be, and he proselytizes for everybody to be, and he poo-poos on everybody's faith. And I'm like, well, what, I don't understand why my having faith the way I have faith and my experience has brought me here, why that has anything to do with you. I don't quite understand. I'm not trying to make him Christian. I'm not trying to make him a person of faith. I'm not judging him for what he does and doesn't believe, and have a lot of respect for a lot of his beliefs and his willingness to put himself out there to say some things that a lot of people don't have the nerve to say. He does, those power poetry jams and that kind of thing. And it's quite amazing. He's very firm in his beliefs, but he also then goes off on these tangents. If you say something that has anything at all to do with faith, or that he perceives has something to do with your faith, then he just poo-poos on that. And I feel bad for him. I don't dislike him. I just feel bad that he's there. So you're right. Meanness doesn't have a niche. It
doesn't. No, and I have friends that are atheists that, couple things, that probably should use the term agnostic, because to me, if you believe in energy and you believe in psychics and you believe in fairies, you're probably not an atheist. But atheist means I'm no longer Christian, I'm no longer Jewish, I'm no longer Muslim. Part of the top 3 oppressive trifecta. Also, it's hard for me when people identify as atheists and then they want to tell you how Jesus is a myth and never lived, and Buddhists never lived, and Buddha never lived. And it's like, there's not even any historical Jesus. There never was a thing. It's a made-up fairy tale. It's like, okay, well, I'm not telling you that atheism is a made-up fairy tale. So what's with all the made-up fairy tale talk? But it's somehow that makes them sleep better at night by being able to say, well, maybe. It's okay, I don't believe it, it's just a made-up fairy tale. It's one thing to say, I think this existed, and I think this guy said this, and I don't know that I believe that God sent him, and I don't know that I believe that he was even a prophet, but I do acknowledge it happened. But that's not good enough. It has to be like a made-up fairy tale. And that's, And the third thing that makes me sad, well, more things than that make me sad, I'm Irish, is when our brothers and sisters in the LGBT QQI P2SAA community.
X was the
I almost got stuck.
alphabet
I got through. When they feel like because they have been oppressed by one of the great oppressive trifecta, they feel like, well, I can no longer now have any kind of spirituality because this church didn't want me because I'm gay. That makes me sad.
Yeah.
And it's been, as we've talked about, it's been a challenge. Of all of the people that have come, not counting your congregation, Keith, have come to Saturday Night Spiritual, a tiny, tiny sliver of those people are my gay brothers and sisters. Mostly it's my straight friends. Yeah. Because a lot of folks in the community are so turned off to spirituality of any kind. And that makes me sad because,
Well, and a lot of them are seeking it out in other ways that are not very good for them.
Sometimes.
And I hate that for them.
Yeah.
And then sometimes we get them again later on down the road, and sometimes it's very difficult to get them back.
Well, and I think sometimes, especially in this town, but not just, I think everywhere, not just this town, celebrity becomes their spirituality. It becomes about being obsessed with everything they see in media and television shows. And but there's plenty of room for your spirituality and all of that. You don't have to give that up. You don't have to become a monk, you know. You just have to live your life and let something in. Right. Because I think it's good for human beings to believe in something. That's why I always say at the services, if you don't believe in anything and you're here, then at least you believe that you want what's best for the world, and that becomes your religion. It doesn't have to be something supernatural, or it can just be, I want what's best for the world and for the creatures of the earth, and that's the end of the road for me. Well, good, you still have a spirituality. It's just there's nothing celestial about it, but it's still that want to make the world a better place.
And they just love you. And I use the word love specifically because if you can just love, that's the bottom line. Mm-hmm. That's the seed from which all of it grows.
Absolutely. I mean, in a way, that love is my spirituality too. You know, I mean, that's
the bottom line.
That's one of the most important parts of spirituality is how much you love. Yeah. So your first pastor gig was here.
My what?
Your first pastor gig was at Founders?
No. I was my first pastor gig was.
Is that not good? Is that too rock and roll?
My first pastorate was in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay.
But I was teaching school and pastoring at the same time.
Okay. But were you pastor? You were a music minister.
I was music director for many years in the church I grew up in the denomination I grew up in. And then when I came to Metropolitan Community Church, I was first in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm from North Carolina. And St. John's Metropolitan Community Church in Raleigh was my first home church in MCC. And I became the music director there for years. Okay. Like 5-6 years. And
so what was different when you came to Founders the first time?
What was different is that I was giving up teaching, and I was going full-time in ministry.
Okay, so teaching was your full-time, like your day job.
Yes.
And then ministry was your weekend job, your Sunday job, your nights and weekend job.
Yes, and my all of the other time job.
Every minute I'm not in a classroom job.
That's right.
Right. So it was actually taking a full-time ministry job.
Yes, which was, it was a leap of faith because you go to teaching school was my career, and it was what I was doing. You could count on that check coming.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And in ministry, you don't know. I mean, it's nice to think that ministers make a lot of money.
No, I don't.
And there are some churches where that's the case.
Televangelists.
Well, there's that.
We're not that kind of televangelist. We're the poor kind.
We're doing Facebook Live, yes. So
we're Facebook Live evangelists.
but there, and then there are a lot of old churches that have endowments that lend themselves to ministers making a lot of money. And all of that's fine. I'm not upset about that. But in Metropolitan Community Church is only 50 years old. Mm-hmm. In fact, a week from this Sunday, October the 6th, is our 51st anniversary.
So awesome.
So we will have our service. We'll have one service at 10 o'clock on that Sunday.
Okay, I'll be there.
All combined service. Everybody will be in one service. All three services all together. And to think that, I mean, we haven't had all of these years of building, like the Baptists have and the Catholics have and the whatever else that the Presbyterians have. We don't have that history. We're only 51 years old, and so it takes time to build that. Plus, we were started by and for gay people, which was not at the the world at large kind of thing. Even though other people were welcome. We were known as the gay church. And for many people, we still are the gay church. And that's fine. We don't care. I like that. We have lots of straight people that come to our church these days. We have children that come to our church these days. In fact, I love that one of our churches decided that they were in, and this was in the South, but so many people were having children, fostering and having children. So many, even gay people were having children and fostering and adopting children. And so they put out a full-page ad in their local newspaper. Are you tired of parents? Are you tired of your children learning homophobic being, about being homophobic, about being ageist and sexist, and they went down the list of all these things that you will find even prevalent in our churches.
Yeah.
And they said, then we have the Sunday school for you and for your children, or the children's church, whatever it was. And the next Sunday, they had 42 children in their church.
Wow.
And a lot of straight people and a lot of gay people that had children that wanted their children to not grow up with those ideas that many of them had grown up with.
Yeah. It's
and
hard.
I'm seeing this with my own family.
Yeah.
And I have to snicker a little bit when I see some of my very conservative cousins, their children are saying, we just don't believe that.
Yeah.
We don't believe what you're telling us. It doesn't play out. It doesn't make sense. It's not even logical. And yet they're searching people out. They're searching a spirituality out that does make sense. How does this fit into the scheme of my life? Because we are spiritual people. We can pretend we're not, but we really are. And everybody that sits down and thinks about it for a few minutes will realize they are a spiritual person.
Mm-hmm.
They may not have the language. They may have grown up with a language they don't like. They may have turned away from this entity or that church or that synagogue or that mosque or that teaching, that theist or that ism. But deep down inside, we're all spiritual people. And you need only go to a funeral to know that. We're spiritual people.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, how do we do that in 2019? How do I find my spirituality and go to a place? And is it even safe to go to a place, to a building where there are people that will disappoint me at some point?
Mm.
And the reality is, yeah, people are going to disappoint you at some point. The difference, I think, that we try to convey, and this is not just an MCC thing. I think those churches today that are being successful are being ones that own up to their mistakes, own up to saying we're not perfect, own up to saying, we screwed up. Even in our own history, we screwed up. Our denomination screwed up. We should not have done this. And now we're trying to do better. We're trying to be better. And I think that's when you can get that kind of honesty, that kind of love of people that are different than you are, and quit trying to change everybody to fit your cookie cutter model, then I think that speaks to what people can identify with these days.
I agree. I agree. And I think that that hopefully, as the new generations grow up, those old ideas will go away, and kids won't be growing up in hate, and they won't be growing up in. It's an interesting thing how being a watcher of people, as I've been in my 25 years of radio, to see that there's a certain kind of person who tends to be very vulnerable to outside influence. And oftentimes those are folks who are susceptible to some kind of hate that they hear and pick up, whether it's political hate, spiritual, religious hate, whatever it is. They hear something and they resonate. There's a fear in them that they don't fit in. And I think that fear can go two ways. Either you become, you let your freak flag fly, and you become the person who always seeks something different, and you find some kind of alternative culture, whether it's, Comic-Con or, Wicca or, gay rights or whatever it is. You go that direction.
Sure.
Or you allow that feeling of fear to make you become very conservative and very, very, to go towards hate-based speech of some kind, and not necessarily conservative in the old sense of what conservative means. I mean, not politically conservative, like you want less government, that's your business, but to get into a place, because I've had people tell me when they see my videos on Facebook, whether it's Saturday Night Spiritual or it's one of my psychic videos, and they'll say, I really enjoyed your video, but I have to tell you, I'm a Republican. Thinking, what in the hell does that have to do with anything I'm talking about? Is there anything at Saturday Night Spiritual that's anti-Republican? What does that have to do with what in the world? And a lot of my friends that come to those things are Republicans. You just don't know. What in the world? But I think we've now started to split our country in half into, well, everybody who is this, and this belongs on this side, and everybody who's this, and that belongs on this side. And the way the line is split, it's ridiculous. So what? So all Republican people have to be evangelical Christians or Orthodox Jews, or what is the story there? And then all people who are, it just doesn't make any sense, and the breakdown doesn't work. But it's something that folks that are susceptible to falling in line with fear that's coming at them believe that kind of thing. Like we all have to be in lines, or, it's like I have this neighbor at my mom's house. I have 2 homes, and my beach home I inherited from my mom when she passed. And there's this crazy lady that lives next door, and she's like Mrs. Kravitz from Bewitched. And she's extremely fear-based, and, and she's a little boop boop. So, when my mother died and I was not there a lot, or I was there by myself and I was grieving and in the house going through stuff, and then friends came to help me clean out my mom's house, and some of them might have been gay and very gay. This woman decided in her head that the fact that I lived in the city and that she didn't see me that much, well, she didn't see me because my mom didn't like her, because she was a Mrs. Kravitz and my mother was very private, and she was one of those who would butt into business, and that freaked my mom out. That Scorpio did not like her privacy infringed upon. So these were not neighbors that my parents socialized with. And so she got it in her mind, because she didn't know me and I was from the city, that somehow me having that house now was bringing bad juju to the neighborhood. And she's really run with this thing from reporting to the city that there were rats in my house that are running out of my house in droves. I think in the 40 years we lived in that house, I've never seen a rat or a mouse ever. That's probably the only house we ever lived in all across the country that I never did see a rat or a mouse, mostly because I think they need to drink water, and there's no water in Southern California. Then that didn't work because the city came out, and of course, nothing. And then I just got my palm trees trimmed. She told the neighbors on the other side that the rats were living inside the palm fronds. So there's like a whole little rat condo, and it's happening in a palm frond. She came over once and knocked on the door and told me that I needed to sell the house to her sister to save the neighborhood. And I basically told her that it was my family home and I wasn't selling it. And she said, well, you have to understand what we're going through. She said, since you've owned this house, the police have been called to this street 4 times. And I said, they've been called to this house? She's like, no, other houses on the street. And I said, for what? And she said, for domestic violence. And I thought, okay, so I move here and my gay friends are helping me move the furniture, and that's making like a bunch of guys beat their wives. I mean, but just this fear, right? The fear of the other,
right?
That I must be bringing all kinds of Sodom and Gomorrah type stuff with me because I live in the city where bad people live. And obviously I have this whole, degenerative alternative crowd of derelict gay people that come and spend. I mean, I probably have had 3 friends there in all that time. And honest to God, I think only one of them, I think 2 of them were gay. The rest of them were...
And no domestic violence.
And none of us beat each other. Not even just because it was sexy. Not even because we're into that kind of thing. There's no beating has gone on. I'm a quiet neighbor. I don't play music. I'm not splashing in the pool at all hours. Just wait till I move in with all my metaphysical friends and put a Buddha in the front lawn. She's not going to like that. She's going to say there's a rat in that Buddha. But just this fear that can grow even just in an insular community.
Right.
In a very primarily white suburban conservative community that was way worse in the 80s when we moved there than it is now. You never saw a brown face then. Or I remember the first time we went to vote. It was my first election. It was the Bush Dukakis election. We walked into this woman's garage and there was this huge stack of votes. And then next to it, there were like maybe this many. And she started looking for our names in the big pile. And my mom said, I think you might be in the wrong pile. We're Democrats. All like 10 ladies suddenly turned around and were like, and then there were like 5 little ballots and 3 of them were my family. But that's what it was like in the 80s. And certainly it's much different now. But this woman still has this idea that someone from the city came and there goes the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So I think there is a kind of person that is susceptible to fear. And that person, for some reason, tends to gravitate towards some place where there's a person telling them, here are all the rules, and here's the good people, and here's the bad people. And a lot of times that's what these folks are getting from not only very evangelical fundamental religions, but now from this sort of new rise of fundamental politics.
Right.
They want someone to tell them, don't trust this person. This one's okay. This face is bad. These people are bad. This one's bad. This is okay. And it's almost kind of like a strange, like a regression in their own evolution, to not be able to judge for themselves what's right and what's wrong, and to need that firm box of somebody telling them this is okay and this is not okay. Like if God himself came down to the burning bush and cut out some new tablets that were like, thou shalt not trust black people, thou shalt not talk to gays, thou shalt not live next to the city girl, like all of these things that just fear. And it is amazing to me how the internet, just a couple little trolls on the internet that might not even be who they say they are, have really ignited that fear in people. And I think that's part of what we fight against in our spiritual work.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have to be cautious too. I know that I get a lot of, because I am so progressive in a Christian church, well, a church that has a Christian label on it, but not in the sense of we'll beat you over the head Christian, but rather what we think Jesus really was like, Christian. It's amazing how even as tough as I am, as firm as I am in my beliefs, that somebody from back home that I don't even know very well can send me a note on social media that just is so bizarre, and I just scratch my head, and then I will spend time thinking about that one person that is offbeat, they're not there, and part of me just wants to lash out and just put them in their place, and the other part of me says the very fact that they are reaching out says something to me, that number one, either they're so stayed in what they believe that they think everybody should believe that way, which is probably true in those situations. But there have been those that lashed out, that were lashing out because they really wanted an explanation, and they actually were seeking something different than what they were saying, but they could not in their own thinking, in their own church, in their own community, they could not vocalize what was not sitting easy with them inside.
Yeah.
But I'm amazed at how much I can stay awake at night worrying about such people.
Yeah, I think that my mother dying, if this is TMI, then okay. The numbness that came with that and surviving that when I thought I wouldn't has made me just emotionally separated enough, just distant enough, that I don't stay up all night long worried about that. I don't know that I would have survived what's going on in our country right now if it hadn't been for that. And I think it enables me to work with clients. I don't know if I could have done the work before. I used to always say, because my mom was a therapist and my grandmother was actually a very well-known child psychologist. And I used to always say, people would say, why didn't you become a psychologist? And I would say, I would be the worst psychologist because I would take everybody's problems home at night and they would drive me crazy. Maybe that's why I didn't do this work until after my mom died, because it just numbed me out enough that I can deal with people's problems all day and love them and put energy in them and then see what's going on in the world. And I am one of those that does watch the news and then go home and be able to get a good night's sleep and then get up in the morning and reset so that I'm not freaking out about everybody's feelings. Although I will tell you, I lost a friend last week and I've just felt like a bell rung from it. And a friend of mine was in a very bad accident last month. And I didn't sleep for 2 days thinking about it. So there is still that empath part of me that carries things around with me. And that's the empath in you that won't let you put it down. Yeah. I just called Keith an empath. So that would have freaked you out when you were a Pentecostal boy and I just called you an empath. But you were absolutely an empath. So I think it's allowed me just enough distance so I can do this work. Because, being a counselor, being a spiritual practitioner, being a minister, you hear a lot of people's problems. A lot of people come to you with their sadness and their hurt and their upset. And you have to let it all sort of move through you, but you have to then let it move out the other end. Because otherwise it becomes a lot and you can't take it all into your own being all the time.
Right. And it's hard not to.
Yes.
Because you'd never, if I didn't learn how to, well, and here's the other piece of it. Part of me has to remember what I tell everyone else, that it is all a matter of trust.
Mm.
And if I'm going to trust, I have to trust God too.
Mm-hmm.
I have to trust God to take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
I have to trust God to take care of things that are way out of my jurisdiction. So I have to remember, stay in my lanes, and my lane is to encourage you and to comfort you, and a lot of times just simply to be present with you. And I can't fix everything for you,
Mm-hmm.
but I can be present with you and help you work it out.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But then how do you let it go?
Yeah, that's the hard piece for me. And most of the time, it's just out of habit. It's out of saying, okay, before I go to bed or go to sleep, to say, God, I can't fix this for them, and I can't even fix my own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to have to trust. I'm just going to have to put my trust somewhere else, and then maybe I can get some sleep.
Okay. What keeps you up at night when you can't get sleep?
Usually, if I can't sleep, it's because there's something. The task that I've been given seems a little overwhelming.
Okay.
I'm the pastor of a large church,
Mm-hmm.
and I've never pastored a large church before. And there are certain things that I think are out of my element. So I have to depend on others around me to make that happen. And I've always been really good. I've worked in administration before, and I didn't mind it because I just pulled people around that filled in the things that I wasn't great at.
Mm-hmm.
People say, "Oh, you're one of the best preachers we've ever heard," and I'm like, "Oh, that's good." So that's one of my gifts. So I'm one of those people.
You're wonderful.
Thank you. So I'm like, I don't have to toot my own horn about that. If that's what people believe is my gift, then fine. I think I'm a pretty good writer. I think I'm a pretty good encourager. I think I'm a pretty good comforter. At the same time, there are certain things that I don't do well that are required of me in my job. And it's those things that I shouldn't say I'm constantly, but I'm constantly looking at, but those things don't always keep me up at night.
Mm.
It's the things when I'm not trusting as much. The only other thing that comes to me is when I'm having my own personal stuff that I forget that I can share with other people.
Yeah. I've had to learn to do that. When I first started doing radio, I thought, I'm never going to talk about my private life. And that lasted about 2 shows. I've learned to just, at some point, I just realized, look, I'm just going to be an open vessel and just share everything. If anybody learns anything from it, great. If they don't, great. I mean, there's still things. I don't talk about personal relationships, or when I'm having problems with people, I very rarely talk about it openly. And when I do, it's when I realize the situation's already done. Like I'm not, that relationship's not coming back. I don't talk about my romantic relationships at all because I think there's some things you have to have just for you. Sometimes I do. I do talk about some of them. That's not true. I have occasionally talked about, I was in a very narcissistic relationship, and I'm very open about that, as you know. Also, I have an ex that is a very good friend. We kind of grew into siblings, and he means a lot to me. So I talk about him, and I refer to him as my ex, just because I think it's good for people to know when I speak openly about the narcissistic situation that I survived. It's important for people to know, well, I'm not just some vengeful bitch who hates all my exes. Because, it's nice for people to get a gauge for what's really going on.
Sure.
Some people hate all their exes. They say bad things about all their exes. I don't,
And I have great exes.
Aren't you wonderful? And
I do. I love them
too,
all.
Except for that one thing.
Well, you're allowed to have one.
Everybody has one. But I think to have been with somebody for 10 years and for a really awesome friendship to have developed out of it is an enormous success.
Yes.
And I focus more on the relationship we have now and not so much on why didn't that relationship last. But there's some things I didn't talk a lot about my relationship with my mom in great detail. I talked about wonderful things she said always until she passed, because I knew she was very shy and it would have made her embarrassed. And I never talked about my father, who I did not have a relationship with. People would start to figure out I had no relationship with him just by the fact that I eliminated him from things. They would say, even somebody I was dating once said, I'm taking it you didn't have a great relationship with your dad because I don't think I've ever heard you mention him. And, but then after he died, Mom and I talked about it, and she was like, I think it's important that you tell the truth about what he was so that other people can learn from it. And, narcissistic parent, then you get involved in a narcissistic relationship. Happens to a lot of people. Yes, it does. And that is a huge epidemic in our world right now, this narcissist thing. Yes, it is. And it's growing. And I saw my mother go through 52 years of that and what it did to her when he died. She thought it would free her, and instead he kind of pulled her into the grave after him because she hadn't resolved things with him. She had not cut those cords. And so I teach people every day, like, fix it before they die. And fix it doesn't mean you go and say, I'm sorry and whatever. You don't have to do that, but fix it inside of you. Cut those cords so that, because once they're dead, you can't cut that cord the same way anymore. So all of those things, I think, that I talk about and I'm very open about. But there are some things that I like to keep private just because I never used to talk about my health because I grew up in the entertainment business. Someone sees you're sick, you never work again. So you know what I mean? I was just even telling my boss that the other day. He had no idea what I had gone through, the pain I had been in since my knees went bad in the winter. And I said, I grew up in entertainment, never let them see you sweat. But I think maybe I have done people around me a disservice by not letting people know what shape I've been in, because you have to show people your vulnerability. I'm getting better about it.
Yeah.
So I understand that that's not an easy thing for you. It's not for me either.
No, and when it's me, it's just me. And I live alone. I have a dog, and so the dog always knows what I'm going through. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times other people never guess. And of course, when you're the minister, you're called. It's not just that I'm a minister, but I'm called to encourage other people. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you one thing that's kept me awake this week. I haven't slept very much this week. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
And I'll tell you why. And I didn't feel it all day last Sunday. All day last Sunday, I was just grateful. We had wonderful church at 9:00. We had wonderful church at 11:00. I went to see Downton Abbey with a friend after church. And of course that was just, to die for. And I went home and I spent time with the dog all evening. And I just kept feeling grateful. And I spoke to my friend, Reverend Wayne Lindsay. He calls me every year on the 22nd of September. Because it's the anniversary of my mom's death. Oh. And this year was the 50th anniversary of her death. Mm. And ordinarily, I will go for weeks with this underlying sadness, depression, and a lot of times I can't even put my finger on it. It's like, why do I feel this way? Why am I feeling so heavy? And then I'll realize what the date is, that it's right around this. And ironically, you were talking about relationships. Ironically, in looking back over my life, she died when I was 10 years old. Mm-hmm. Almost all of the relationships I ever got into, romantic relationships, started in September or October in the fall. So the combination of her dying in September and me losing that, my mom, and there was that bond. And also with it being fall season. So the spring and the summer are gone, and of course I come from the South, and the leaves were changing, and it's becoming, something was happening, and it wasn't as happy. Fall is not as happy, as spring and summer. Sure. And so I got in most of my relationships. As you can see, since I'm still very single, none of those worked out exactly right, which is okay. It's okay. And so I have to realize in the fall that I am more vulnerable naturally. It just kind of happens every year that I'm more vulnerable, that I don't fall into that. If I happen to go out on a date, that I don't start thinking, well, this might be a good mate.
Wouldn't it be nice to not be single? Yeah.
Right. And I have to remember that I really enjoy being single.
I have 2 weeks. The first week of August is usually when all the great things happen to me. It was the week we moved to California. It's my radio anniversary, my anniversary as a journalist, my anniversary as with my band. All mystical, magical things always, that first 10 days of August. The third week of March, somebody on the radio once called it shit happens to Sheena week. That's two of my major accidents were 2 days apart. One horrible friend heartbreak, horrible narcissistic relationship started that week. I had a stalker whose birthday was that week. Everything, and I always kept thinking that is the week. That's the week from hell. The 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th. And my huge freeway accident when I had my near-death experience was the 18th. I thought that's it. Nothing. If something happens on the 11th, it'll round out that week. And then lo and behold, Mama died on March 11th. I was like, you got to be kidding me. It cannot happen this week. So when that week is coming, I can feel myself start to get depressed, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden I think, oh God, it's that friggin' week is coming. Here we go.
Yeah.
And literally through that whole week, I just think nothing else can happen. Nothing else can happen. Nothing else can happen. But it's crazy how that works.
We're going to pray it better this next year.
Is that
for 2020? It's going to be better. You're going to surround yourself with
Yes.
positive people.
We're going to have the third week of March prayer circle.
That's it.
Isn't that as a matter of fact, when I got in the second accident, I almost didn't leave the house because I had this thing. I have this very strange thing that only four times since my accident, which was 1991, has St. Patrick's Day been on that Sunday. And the 4 times it happened were that year, the year I got in the narcissistic relationship, the year I got in the second car accident, and the year Mom died. And I almost didn't go out that weekend. I had a thing where I would never, because I'm like, no, this is going to be bad. The St. Patty's is Sunday. Monday is the anniversary of the accident. There's no way I'm going out. And then someone talked me into going out and picking up my mail like 3 blocks away. I was coming home from my P.O. box and some guy flew out of a driveway and T-boned me and totaled my car. I'm like, this can't even happen. So now when that happens, just don't even look for me. I'm home for those 4 days. So don't even look for me until the 19th of March. But that's interesting how things happen cyclically like that. And I totally understand that.
Yes.
Well, and do you find that you're always trying to recreate in relationships characteristics of things that your mom had? Because you are, I can tell that you're spiritually very attached to her still.
I am. I think, I haven't really thought about it that way, other than it was the safety of that connection with her. And she was someone I idolized, not just as my mom, but as a person.
Mm.
And as I've gotten older through the years, I realized her commitment to God, her commitment to my dad and her marriage, her commitment to me, her commitment to our church was amazing.
Mm.
I mean, I think I told you this already, but the pastor, I had never seen this before. Our pastor, when he preached to her funeral, he broke down and sobbed in the middle of his sermon or his message, and he said, y'all are just going to have to forgive me, but I feel like I've lost my right arm, because she was so involved in the church and everybody depended on her to do so many things.
Yeah.
And so I realized all of that dedication that I didn't always appreciate as a 10-year-old child. As an adult, I look back and those things, maybe I emulate those things. I want to be that in my service to God, because she was always so fulfilled. She was always so joyous. That doesn't mean she didn't have a bad day. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
Doesn't mean problems didn't ever come to our house. It just meant that overall, she lived a very joyful life, and she was always doing good for other people. She and my dad both, they were always doing good for people, just constantly. And I was thinking this, you know how you're in a big store or a mall or something, and you see somebody way down 2 stores, and they don't notice you.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to make a quick decision. Can I get to them and speak to them, or do I just let them go on their way? And
Sure.
My mom would never let anybody leave without her making an attempt to say hello, because she was a social person and she just loved people,
Yeah.
and they knew she loved them. It was genuine. And I don't mean she went and held up their day, and stood there talking forever. I just meant she would always make sure that nobody, and I don't think she did it out of, oh, I'm afraid of what they'll say if they see me and I don't speak. It was none of that.
Right.
It was that she genuinely just loved seeing people and saying hello and hope you're having a good day and how is life treating you, and if something wasn't going well in their lives, then she was there for them.
Wow. That's beautiful.
It is.
So that's who you are.
Well,
So you do have a lot of her in you.
I think so. I try to be. If I can only be half of that, it would be awesome.
Yeah.
Because I look back and see her whole life was that.
Mm-hmm.
My dad did things that he went the extra mile for people that I'm like, oh dear God, how did you ever even have time for us at all?
Yeah.
Because you were always doing stuff for everyone else, and yet he did. He found time for us.
Yeah. I wonder sometimes how my mom did everything. I think she do all that, all the cooking and the cleaning and the taxes. And my dad basically went to work and came home with a paycheck. That was all he did. And he'd sometimes, with pushing, he would do yard work or, go on the roof and fix something. But she did everything. And I remember once he went on a business trip and they were remodeling a bathroom. We had just moved to a house in Baltimore. She literally took that bathroom out with a sledgehammer, took the tiles out in the shower, took the toilet out with a sledgehammer. I never could have done that in my life. I can't do that now. I can barely lift a sledgehammer. I mean, she was tough in a kind of toughness that I aspire to be tough like that. And for a long time, I think the reason I didn't come out of the psychic closet was I just figured I was never going to be the psychic that she was. So why even bother? If you can't do something well, don't. It's a reason I don't do cartwheels. Never try. If you can't do something well, don't do them at all. But she, that fear, I fought that for a long time because of that. But the truth is, I actually think she would be proud of the work that I do. And
I was about to say, but you're being the best you, and that's what she reared you to be.
yes. And
Not to be
yes.
her. She didn't want you to be the best her you could be. She wanted you to be the best you could be.
And I think she would have been thrilled that I was a minister, even though I have to tell you, we never discussed it ever, even one time in our lives did we ever talk about that. But I think, and sometimes when I'm at service, especially when I'm at Saturday Night Spiritual, or I'm just attending one of your services at Founders MCC, I can feel her kind of screaming in my ear and clapping to the music. She loves the music. Clapping to the music and dancing around, because that's that church community feeling that she wanted. That's why she never had me baptized, because she knew someday I would find you and then I would be baptized. The
real you.
Yeah.
The one that's not skeptical of it, but knows what it really means.
Exactly.
And what it really means to you, not what it means to everybody else.
And there's nothing wrong with being baptized as a child and then getting rebaptized or not, whatever you want to do, or never getting baptized. But my mom had this big thing that she didn't believe. This was just her belief that you shouldn't baptize a child because you're putting them into a religion they didn't ask to be a part of. The same way that she never discussed her spirituality with me until the first time I sat down and asked her if she believed in reincarnation. Because there were things about Christian. By then we had moved to Orange County, and an ex-boyfriend of mine had gotten very into evangelical Christianity, very into the Calvary Chapel Church. And there were just so many things that were not resonating with me. And I was 19, and I sat down with her and said, this doesn't seem right, and this is odd, and what about this, and I believe in this, and what is with the energy that comes out of your crystals, and where does that fit in? She was like, oh, honey, sit down, here we go. But she'd believed in reincarnation since she was 25, since 1959, 58, and had never told me because she didn't want to push her religion on me. She was very big into that, Although I got to tell you, that woman had a nativity set that covered it covered one whole hutch in the dining room and then carried on to the next one. It went all the way to Jerusalem. It just kept going. Who knew there were that many shepherds or donkeys in all of Israel? It just went and went and went. And she would just get more and more pieces. And it started out when they would make them ceramic. But then after a while, you couldn't find the ceramic anymore. So she started getting the resin ones. And then when I was maybe 10, she bought me my own. So I have one. So I have hers and mine. So technically I could have, a whole town with two mangers, two Jesuses. She loved wise men till the end of time. I remember when I was moving some things around her house, I found these wise men that she was going to make me that were half done, and I thought, oh God, well, what am I going to do with them? Because somebody's got to finish them for me, because I am not artistically inclined. And she had a thing about wise men before there was the Discovery Channel, and we ever talked about how the wise men were psychics. They were mystics. But when I was a kid, they never talked about that. I didn't know that till Discovery Channel found that out. God bless the Discovery. I had a friend once whose super religious mother was like, why does the History Channel hate Jesus? Because she hated the historical Jesus specials where they talked about he could have been married and Mary Magdalene could have been his wife and the wise men are psychics and this happened and that happened. Poor Jesus. The History Channel hates him.
Who knew?
For daring to say that he might have had a friend or
forget
been
facts.
a man
Don't let those pesky facts get in the way of your tradition.
I was watching something the other day. I'm finishing up Downton Abbey. I'm on season 6. I know, where have I been? I went to season 4 and then whatever I had stopped carrying it. And then when I got Amazon Prime, I forgot to start up again. And so I'm now, but the Christmas episode that's the end of season 5, when Mary is singing, and I don't remember what hymn she's singing, but there's something in there about Jesus being fair. And I literally almost did a spit take with my water. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure he was just as blonde and blue-eyed as the day is long, because that happens a lot there. But that's more the History Channel hating Jesus by saying he wasn't blonde. It just makes me laugh. But, but I think the way that my mom incorporated her teachings of Christ Christian beliefs and her love of Christmas and Easter and her metaphysical spirituality sort of raised me to do this. I mean, it's what I should, you know what I mean? Because I have a lot of New Agey friends that they won't even say Jesus. They won't ever quote the Bible. And I'm like, but there's good stuff in the Bible. Doesn't mean you have to.
There's good stuff in all the holy books.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to exclusively be your thing.
Right.
But it's okay to pick out the passages that you like and incorporate them. And then there's a lot of folks in the New Age community that just have folded whatever they grew up with into what they do. Yes. And they're fine with that. And you see sort of those two schools of thought, sort of the more conservative, like I said, fundamentalist New Age community, and those that are much more interfaith and more inclusive and I'm surprised there aren't more interfaith churches than there are. I'm surprised there aren't more interfaith services. Doesn't that surprise you?
Yeah. I think there are interfaith groups that didn't go back to their individual religions or religious faith centers to worship, but they belong to interfaith groups. We have the Quick group here in town that is interfaith, and we also have when I was in Baton Rouge for the last 11 and a half years, I was amazed. Here in the South, there was this wonderful interfaith group, and whenever some people from when I say back home, I generally mean North Carolina. I always say, well, have you been to an interfaith group lately? Have you been to something where the interfaith group gets together and does something? Because I think that would help you understand where I'm coming from and some of the things that I say. But they always think, a lot of times family or friends from back home will think that if I'm accepting of someone that's Muslim in my life and I respect their faith or their walk with God and their language and their customs, that then somehow I'm belittling Jesus. And I used to feel that way myself. So I understand that they feel that way.
Oh, of course.
Because I was afraid. But once I realized it was fear-based and that I was just living in fear, and then I met this wonderful Jewish woman in the school I was teaching. And she was the attendance lady. And I just loved her. She was a doll. She wore, those things you can get at the dollar stores, these now that have all the, like, they put them out at Christmas, the little rainbow ears and all that stuff you just put on. Well, back before, I don't know where she got them, because this was many years ago before they were easy to find. She had some for almost every day of the
She
year.
might have made them.
She may
Just
have.
out of headbands.
I'm telling you, she came up with these most creative things, and she was constantly wearing something. So when you walked in, to give your excuse, when the students would walk in and give their lame excuse for why they were late or they weren't at school today or whatever, she was always this joyful person that they met. But she was Jewish. And she came to a Christmas party that my department chair was throwing at her house. And I looked at her and I said, are you okay with this? And she said, well, of course I am. It's not my faith, but I know that it means something to a lot of my friends. And I was like, she's so open to how I believe, and she has such respect for my beliefs. How dare I not respect hers? And she's being more Jesus-like than I'm being. And she's a Jew, and so was Jesus. So now I'm in a quandary. Now what do I do with this theology? Right? So now I've screwed myself to the wall with my own belief system that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And so once I realized, her faith means something to her, and it must have meant something to Jesus because he never renounced his being a Jew. He never renounced Judaism.
Of course not. He was very proud to be a rabbi. His friends all called him rabbi.
Yes.
And he was very proud of that.
He was. So how dare I?
He didn't want to be king of the Jews, but that was just because he didn't want that kind of a title. He didn't want to be king of anything. He just wanted to wander around and heal his people and go to the next town.
Exactly right.
With his friends.
Right.
And maybe his wife. But we don't know. We have no proof.
Girlfriend or boyfriend.
Whatever. Yeah.
He did have 12 men running around behind him all the time.
I know.
I'm just saying.
You never know.
Just
Yes.
saying.
I know.
I like to think of him that way, quite frankly. But that's a personal
I like to think of him being an evolved being who didn't care about gender.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's the truth, but that's how I think. I think we all see him reflected in who we are a bit. I do think the fact that and we should just talk about theology sometime. You should come. We should just talk theology.
Cool,
the fact that he allowed and encouraged Mary Magdalene to be a part of his ministry showed how progressive he was, because that was certainly not something women were included in that culture at the time. So that certainly shows how far thinking he was.
Right.
That he was allowing her to travel with all of them and take part in spreading the word. That's...
Yes, he did have women around, or people who identified as women around him in ministry.
Yes.
He had them in ministry. And even though we only have 12 males that he called to be his personal disciples,
right,
we know that that's not technically true. Right. That's only partially true.
Right.
Because of all the women that were left out as Christians. In fact, I was reading something just yesterday. I've been in overdrive all week. Sunday, I was very grateful throughout the day, but I have also noticed that I have been extremely busy. Yeah. And I'm not sleeping well, and I realize that all of that is the sadness deep within me, and that I just have to pay attention to that.
Time of year, yes.
It is. But I've also been reading more, and I was reading something just yesterday about Mary Magdalene and how some people don't even believe there actually was a Mary Magdalene.
Really?
And that when we talk about Mary and Martha, if you go back to the original scrolls, it's not Mary and Martha, it's just Mary. Uh-huh. And it's like, could she not have had? But then our traditions are messed up again, and then our theology might mess up again. So why do those people in high places that learn these new things not teach it to us? Well, it messes up the Christmas play, and it messes up the manger scene at your mama's house.
Right, and also because the History Channel hates Jesus, so you have to be cautious.
We don't want to upset the Discovery Channel and the
History Channel, because it just hates Jesus. That's such a strange... I mean, look at how much time the History Channel gives to Jesus, and none of the specials are ever about like, oh, that Jesus didn't exist. I actually think the History Channel is a fan of Jesus. I think the History Channel, there's a lot of stuff devoted, gives Jesus a lot of time. But isn't that interesting how you're so set in your beliefs that anything historical, even if it's just about like what Jesus ate for breakfast, it can suddenly be a threat to everything that you believe. Right. Yeah. That makes it sad because if I grow up liking somebody or worshiping someone or idolizing them, I love to find out that there's something plus, Like, from the time I was a baby, obsessed with Abraham Lincoln. As I've gotten older and learned more about him, I only like him more. As a matter of fact, I read this thing a couple years ago that I'm obsessed with, that when he was president, he would open up the White House a few hours a week and just let people get in line and come and talk to him and tell him, oh, my husband died and the barn burned down and I need money. Can you help? Or I'm very upset about this. What do you think? Or why isn't there a law for this? What do you think? And he would just listen to people's stuff and talk about an empath. I mean, if you read his writings, what an empathic man. That must have been a lot. No wonder he aged so bad in the White House. Not to mention the fact there was a war. But just taking in all that stuff from all those people firsthand, not just, tweets or, what's on the news, but honestly to sit there and listen to people's pain and open up the White House and let people come in and just say, I'm in pain and I need your help. Wow. If we had a president that did that now, unbelievable.
Yes.
So when I love somebody, I want to learn that they're more than I thought they were.
Sure.
And I think we've learned so much from learning about historical Jesus, we've learned so much about maybe Jesus was even so much more than we thought. But I think that's wonderful, not a bad thing. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But I think there's a fear that, heretics like me will turn Jesus into some kind of a new age or liberal. Do you know what I mean? Because their idea of Jesus is not Jesus loved everybody. And, it amazes me how many of them still think Mary Magdalene was the prostitute. It's like, have you guys ever read the book? Have you read your book? Do you even, when you go to a motel, it's in the drawer, people. Have you ever even read it? But they just think, I guess because they like the idea that she was just some whore that followed him around and he took pity on her. They don't understand anything about her social status, or that if you were a woman at that time and you had a last name, it meant you were someone who had property and you had status. And they just, oh no, she was just a whore. And, and his mom was bored and they just followed around because, mom can't get away from you. And whores can't get enough of you. And what a strange, I don't know. But here we are, my friends. Saturday Night Spiritual is the second Saturday of every month. And it's at the Founders MCC Church in Hollywood. It's at SaturdayNightSpiritual.com and FoundersMCC.org. And Keith, where can people find you? You do the 9 o'clock and the 11 o'clock every Sunday.
That's right. And you can join us live on Facebook at Founders Metropolitan Community Church on Facebook and other places. And you can also find us at FoundersMCC.org online.
Beautiful. Do it, my friends. And if you missed any of the links for today, SheenaMetalExperience.com, LATalkRadio.com. Don't forget to email me and let me know what you think of the show and my fabulous guests. Also, social media, I'm at Sheena Metal everywhere. My movement, I am raising thevibration.com and raisingthevibration.org. My spiritual practice, I am raising yourvibration.com and SheenaMetalSpiritual.com. And then, of course, Saturday Night Spiritual is my monthly service at the Founders MCC at SaturdayNightSpiritual.com. The next one is Saturday, October 12th at 7 p.m. And 1 week from today, I'm teaching a webinar about, it's a healing webinar about crystals and how they can improve and enhance your life. It's called I Never Met a Crystal I Didn't Like. And it's at meetthecrystals.com. It's 6 o'clock. It's only $20. My webinars will stay cheap, so you can come and afford them. And if you missed my first two, whydoifeeleverything.com and starvethedark.com. That's my narcissist awareness workshop. Starve that dark, people. It's the Sheena Metal Experience on LA Talk Radio. And you know what happens here, my friends? Every Monday through Friday, 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific time, we rip the veil off the human sideshow and expose those big old Homo sapiens at their most bizarre sometimes and at their most beautiful every single day. And you know it's my show, and that's true, my friends. It is my show. But what it really is, always and forever, it's your experience. Thanks for listening. Have a great night, and I'll see y'all tomorrow right on LA Talk Radio.
Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.